Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Dr. K. Dr. K, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
We are going to talk about something that, frankly, I don't think we talk about as much as we need to, which is emotional health and being an emotional health mentor. And I wanted to start by asking you your academic and professional background and what brought you to your current role.
Yeah, absolutely. My bachelor's degrees, I have two bachelor's degrees from Cornell University. I studied biological sciences as well as applied economics and management. I ended up working on Wall Street for 8 years after my undergrad, which was during the Great Recession. That was not a very fun time to be in that industry. But I hit a certain point in my life where I had to make a decision. You hit rock bottom and it changes things. So I'll probably get to that here. But then I did my medical training at Sonoran University of Health Sciences. So I'm a licensed naturopathic physician, and my focus is emotional health for entrepreneurs, executives, and their companies.
And who are primarily the people that you currently work with?
So this is a group of people that I call growth seekers, right? These are the high achievers that working hard is in our DNA. It's just who we are. However, it can come at a cost, right? What's the point in having great success if it comes at the expense of your family, it comes at the expense of your own health? And so something I learned fortunately earlier on in my career journey was that having success, but it not being that holistic form of success is really it's a trap. And so something I deeply believe in, and this is primarily why my clients come to me, is how do I move past burnout? How do I ensure that I'm successful in all the ways that matter to me? And that includes family life, that includes our friends, relationships, communities, like being involved in our churches or whatever else, right? And being healthy. Because again, what's the point in all that if we end up not living the long, healthy life that we want? And so it's really about the individual that is looking to live outside of their comfort zone, that might have gotten to a point of enough is enough. I'm tired of not living to my potential, and I'm ready to make a change.
I just interviewed a couple of authors, so the craft of writing is on my mind. And you have recently published a book, The Emotional Healthy You. So I wondered if we might spend a few minutes visiting about the craft of writing for you. And I'm always intrigued to ask another author this. And it starts with, are you a morning person, an afternoon person? Do you write when the spirit moves you? Do you have more structure around that? Could you talk to us about your craft of writing?
Definitely when the spirit moves me. There's no question about that. I think this is my first book, The Emotionally Healthy You. And I think just from English class, going back to high school and such, we have a perception of what writing is. And every time I sit down with a keyboard and I write, whether it's an email or anything, it's you write and the edit at the same time, but that really shuts off the creative brain. And thankfully, I was working with a business mentor of mine who also, her company handles all of my branding and marketing, and she was instrumental in helping me publish this book. But she, having known me for a number of years, knows that she said, Dr. K, your best stuff comes out when you are talking to somebody and it comes out of your mouth, not from the keyboards or a pen, right? And one unique thing that she had me do was, again, since she knew my lessons pretty well inside and out, just having helped me market all that time, she said, so she wrote me 30 index cards with different questions, and they could be anything ranging from how does a business owner handle imposter syndrome, or what do you believe about boundaries, and all of those types of questions. And she said, so she wrote these questions down. I couldn't see what they were. And she said, so here's the rule. You take out your phone, you hit the record button, and then you flip a card over and you answer the question vocally. Caveat, you cannot answer the question the way you've ever answered it before. So that forced me to, in the moment, instinctively, really forced me to even take that thought leadership up another level, right? And so that was extremely helpful. So once we took that, we transcribed it, and she was served as my editor for the book as well. And so she assembled it in a kind of a chapter structure that she thought made sense. And then when I went through it, And then I kind of took all the stories or the concepts that I talked about, and then I fleshed it out with a keyboard, right? The more traditional way. But as far as, and then I ran into the trouble there of how do you get in the zone of that? Because if I'm in the middle of working with clients, or if I'm in the middle of working on the business, my brain is not in that full creative space. So when the spirit hits you, that was something I had to kind of facilitate. But I actually brought my strategy was kind of modernized a little bit. My wife still thinks I don't get enough mileage out of spending $3,500 on this device, but I bought an Apple Vision Pro, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, Tom, but it's basically Apple's virtual reality, augmented reality goggles. It sits on your face. It's like a face computer. And so when you do that, it blocks out all the sound and it blocks out all your sight. One of the things you can do is put yourself in these beautiful high resolution environments. So I was sitting on the top of a volcano in Hawaii with the sound of you see the clouds below you and the sound of the wind and everything else. And the only screen I had in front of me was my Google Doc for whatever chapter I was working on. And I was able to lose myself in that and sometimes work on chapters for an hour or 2 hours at a time without distraction. And so that was my process to get everything done for the book.
Over 50 years ago, I took a health class in what we used to call junior high school. And health used to be taught by a coach. So I had coach. And coach said something that has stuck with me since then, which was his definition of health. And he said health is a state of mental, physical, social, emotional, spiritual well being, and not just the absence of disease.
Absolutely.
And I'm not quite sure what his IQ was, but that has stuck with me literally forever. And so I wanted to use that background to ask you and introduce the topic of emotional health. And how do you define emotional health? And how can we all move towards that?
First, I'll define what emotional health is not. Just like the absence of disease. I think it's a really powerful way to look at health is not just the absence of disease. Emotional health is not being a tough guy, that nothing affects me. I'm impervious to everything. I don't talk about what's going on. Nothing. It's not that. It is the ability to, emotional health is the ability to identify, process, and act. Identify, process, and act upon what we're feeling, either in a specific moment or situations that carry out over the course of time. So identify, okay, what am I feeling? What's going on? Processing it to then say, all right, given this, I have a game plan for this. I know what happens every time, let's say I get into a disagreement with my spouse and we kind of go at each other and whatever it is, right? And then I'm going to process it this way so that it's a better outcome. And then act is then to actually act upon it rather than simply reacting to what happens in our life around us. And the reason why it's so important right now is because when you look at the amount of stimuli that cause stress in our day-to-day life, the amount of stress that we experience in one day now in our modern life is more than we would experience in a whole lifetime 100 plus years ago, because we were made for nature. We were not made for this crazy modern world that we're in. Our brain, our chemistry, our biochemistry, the anatomy and physiology, everything is optimized for survival in nature. And those systems are not made for our modern world. And that's why I think emotional health is so important. Another way you can think about it is it's your emotional intelligence plus your emotional resilience.
So, what are the 5 pillars of emotional health?
So the 5 pillars of emotional health are effectively this. So Tom, if I were to ask you, let's say this plant back here, if it's not doing so well, if it's dying, what would you suggest that I do for it?
Water,
Water? Anything else?
sunlight,
Cool. Give me a
might
third.
even say a few kind words to it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And so notice water, sunlight, you could say even the soil, right? The nutrients. Nobody ever says the first thing out of their mouth is let's find it the right medication. Nobody ever says that because ultimately we know that this is an organism that's made for nature, not again, what it's finding itself in right now. And we instinctively know it just needs water, sun, and soil. And so when you take the same approach to your 5 pillars of emotional health, it is number one, your psychology, the study of your own mind, understanding how did my brain specifically develop the way that it is so that the shortcuts that it does to conserve energy might lead us to make assumptions a little too soon, might make us not just about the world around us, but ourselves. and understanding that. Number two is relationships. We're the average of the 5 people and ideas that we spend the most time with. Being around other growth seeking individuals is a powerful way to ensure that we are not living again with in more suffering than we really need to, but rather we can focus on what we can control and move forward. Number three is nutrition. 90% of the serotonin, dopamine, GABA, all these vital neurotransmitters that regulate how we think, act, and feel, they come from the bacteria that live in our gut. And so our gut health and our emotional health are so intricately connected. And so I teach a lot about that. And then number four is sleep. Sleep is the first thing to go when we're busy, high achieving individuals. And yet it's the best thing we can do for our long term brain health. It clearly the nights that we don't get as much sleep, it's easy to be a little more crabby, less emotionally resilient. But sleep is the time that we commit things to long term memory. The brain literally goes through a detoxification period during sleep. It's vital for our emotional health. And then number five, body movement. Motion dictates emotion. So that's psychology, relationships, nutrition, sleep, and body movement are the 5 pillars.
So so I perceive myself as a high achiever. I have one switch on and off. I don't have a dimmer. I get up very early in the morning and I work very late at night all day, every day. But I love it. And I'm still driven to that at 67. And I'm still playing tapes inside my head that I heard as a teenager, and they motivate me. Some people will call that toxicity. Some people will say it's unresolved issues. Probably yes to all the above. Nevertheless, it still motivates me to do what I do today. What's the balance? Is it individual? Is it fine tuned by talking to someone like you? How do you help someone who clearly is driven to
Mhm.
keep that drive going, yet not damage
Yeah.
themselves?
It's a vital question there because, again, the last thing we'd want to do, Tom, is to demotivate you, right? You do too much important work. And so, as a high achiever, how do we find that balance between being kinder to ourselves and getting to now, maybe somebody that might go too far on the extreme would be that negative voice in our head that beats ourselves up. And that's the place I was in, right? Being a high achieving professional on Wall Street, all of that happened, but with that mentality of nothing was ever good enough. And so even when I achieved great things, the promotions, the raises, the things that I had been working years for, I remember when I made vice president, they give me the news and literally 4 seconds later in my head, okay, what next? And I never enjoyed the journey or the destination. It was then what's the next thing? That's where it goes too far. So really the balance, and there's a chapter in my book when I talk about this, it's called the framework for joy. It's something I came up with to discuss a different framework for how to be a high achiever without really the negative self-talk and things along those lines. And it's simply this. It's it's understanding the difference in expectations and standards. So your expectations drive how you feel in response to a situation. And so this is our emotional reaction to the things that happen around us. A lot of times those are out of our control. The standards are what we will and will not tolerate going forward. And those are usually within our control. What generally happens is that for most of those of us that have that negative self-talk, even as a high achiever, the expectation for ourselves is far too high. So even when if we barely reach it, that might have been a 98th percentile outcome, but still not good enough. But then what we tolerate in terms of how we treat ourselves is sometimes subpar. And so the standards are low. And so my framework, the short version of it, is to flip that. Lower the expectations, focus on what you can control, do everything that you can to get the best outcome possible. And at a certain point, let the chips fall where they may. If you can look back and say, you know what, I did the best I could in that situation, that's all we can do. Then we learn from it to say, the standards, let's raise those standards. What do I need to do better next time? How can I move forward that way? So, what I found, at least in my own life, and for a lot of my clients too, Tom, is that even as that negative self talk started to shift and then sometimes even disappear entirely, but the drive actually ended up getting stronger. You know why? Because the drive, and I'm sure this is the case for you too, it's not just the tapes that go on from the teenage years, it's also the drive to make a difference, to make an impact. And so when the focus is I am not being of service to other people if I play small. It's too important for me to do this work for me to play small. And that's the drive that we can lean into that I believe is a really healthy way. Now, the balance between the two, you find what works for you. And I would say if there's no negative consequence to any of the tapes that play in your head, then no big deal. But if there are, then there's a different way to look at it.
Let me pick up on the phrase I think I heard you say, be of service to others. Are you able to have that conversation with high achievers who may be in their 50s or moving into their 60s? Yes, you can still be a high achiever. Yes, you could still maintain this pace, but change the focus from either building and creating to being of service or even being a mentor for the next generation. Does that resonate with high achievers?
All the time. All the time. I'm as you were asking that question, about four examples popped into my head that we don't have time to go through all of them. But I'd say the common thread is this: either somebody that was extraordinary in their corporate career and they retired and still want to do something of good service, and they're recognizing, wait a second, I can mentor younger professionals, and all the things that I learned, right? I can pass that along so that they can maybe take the shortcut. There's an immense sense of meaning that comes from that. Business owners so I work with a lot of exit advisors and people who work with clients who are trying to exit their companies. And a big obstacle is that they find purpose in the work that they do, identity in the work that they do. And so to be able to shift that to, okay, where else can you derive a sense of purpose? Because otherwise it sabotages us from actually being able to sell the company. And so the person maybe drags their feet, does certain things that makes it very difficult to then sell the company. But what I've found is simply this: when you look at the human needs, there's generally four areas that I look at with my clients and what I talk about in my keynotes. Is number one is your stability, roof over our head, food in our belly. Money is really the modern day corollary to all of those things, is being able to afford those things. Number two is belonging, being a part of our families, being a part of our communities, our companies, all of those things, but also belonging to ourselves is a very important feeling. Number three is growth, the need for always growing. And I think this is something that as we get older, if we're trying to grow in the areas that we have already somewhat mastered, it's still possible. It's just maybe a little bit harder. And that's where sometimes it's really fun to expand and try new things, knowing full well that we might not be good at them in the beginning. But guess what? None of us were good at walking when we first started, fell on the floor numerous times, right? Anyone who's watched a baby learn how to walk, it's not pretty, it takes a while. Right. But if all of us thought, hey, I failed at it the first time, I'll never be good enough at this, none of us would be walking. So trying those new things and always growing. But number four is that purpose, that sense of purpose. And this is actually, for a lot of the executives that I work with, stability's in a good place. They got a great sense of belonging. They really care about their teams and take care of them. Growing, they're always in that growth mindset, learning new skills, but there's something missing. And that is that sense of purpose. And this is actually where I think at all stages of life, Tom, not even in 50s and 60s, I think it's so vital for all of us to know why we are here on earth, why we are breathing each and every day. Because in the absence of that, what ends up happening is people need to force a sense of importance. And sometimes in the worst case scenarios, it's imposing their will on others. Some people commit crimes to have a sense of importance to the person that is as a perpetrator to that victim. And I believe a lot of that is because they don't have a deeper sense of purpose. And so where do you find that sense of purpose? There's many ways of doing it. But one thing that I have found has resonated so well, certainly it is the story of my life and many of my clients as well. When we can learn from our past, the pain from our past, and learn from it, teach it, use that in the service of others, it creates a sense of purpose that is really unlike anything else. And it can be the fuel that takes us through the rest of our lives.
Can you suggest some exercises or even daily habits to help build emotional resilience for an executive, really, of any of these levels you've talked about?
Absolutely. So I would say the simplest thing, and we've all heard of morning routines and the importance, but the way that I teach it is a little bit more like morning me time, right? For those of us that are stretched thin, we're taking care of everybody else. We need a little bit of just focus inward for a moment, kind of the oxygen mask philosophy, right? Is simply this: many of us use this as the alarm clock in the morning. But the problem is that we go to bed at night, we're kind of scrolling, putting all these things in our heads. The blue light from these things disrupt our melatonin, not good. Middle of the night, we go to the bathroom, we check to see if somebody texted us at 2:30 in the morning, and now it makes it harder to go back to sleep. And then finally the alarm rings whatever time we want to wake up, and it's the alarm rings, we turn it off, and all of a sudden the phone's in our hand and we're checking all those messages again. We've given up control of our entire day before our feet even hit the ground. So and the reason is that cortisol, which is our alertness hormone, rises to the peak of the day 30 minutes after we wake up. This is when our body is waking up to meet the challenges of the day. Made for nature, because out in nature, what is that challenge? Finding food. So we want to be the most alert when finding food. What I strongly recommend is putting the phone in another room at night. If you need to be able to hear it for emergency purposes, whatever else, put it on the other side of the room, put it nearby with the ringer on so that you can hear the phone ring. But don't put it within arm's length. In the morning, you wake up, brush your teeth, do your thing, wash your face, whatever you need to, and then go create some morning me time, something that you enjoy. So, whether that's meditating or praying, whether that's sitting outside, making a fresh cup of coffee, going for a walk, journaling, all of those things are incredibly powerful, but make something that inspires you. I have clients that they just love to garden, and I don't spend enough time out there. Do it in the morning before you see what your agenda is by looking at your phone. And sometimes that can really just take 15 minutes a day, especially if you can get some of that sunlight exposure in the morning. Very powerful. What that does is it de-stresses the mind. It allows you to focus on what is important, not just in that day, but your overall goals. It allows your body to sync up with those goals as the cortisol rises. The sunlight exposure early in the day normalizes that cortisol curve for the rest of the day. So your sleep is better the following night. And ultimately, all of this gets you more focused so that by the time you actually check your phone and you look at your agenda, talk to anybody else in your household, all those things, we are now connected with ourselves. It goes the longest way. That's something I definitely recommend. And there are other things that certainly move the needle. I think we talked about human needs there. One aspect of that is just understanding what are the things that make you feel alive, those activities that you just love doing for no reason at all. You don't have to justify it to anybody. And oftentimes when we are stressed, we're overwhelmed, those things go away pretty quickly. And oftentimes with my clients, the first time I see them, if they're way too overwhelmed. I have a client that owns an armed guard security company here in Phoenix, and one of his favorite things to do is ride his Harley Davidson, and he never did when the more stressed he got. He'd ride it maybe once in 3 months. His first session, I said, ride it 8 times before you come back and see me in 2 weeks. And he said, really? That's it? That's my homework? I said, yeah, that is. You can't handle anything else right now. It's too much going on. He comes back in 2 weeks. He says, Dr. K, why did I do this all this time? I feel focused, alive, like it. So human needs, understanding what that is for you and implementing that. It's a simple thing, but it just goes such a long way. There's certainly many others that we probably don't have as much time for, but I do talk about them in the book as well.
So, is the start of this journey to recognize you have an issue or a problem, or is it something else?
Generally, we as human beings, just like every being in nature, we're not designed to want to change. Homeostasis is a system in biological organisms that is an active balance. And the reason is that energy is scarce in nature. We don't have the ability to just DoorDash and all of a sudden all these calories show up in front of us, right? Out in nature, you have to do a lot of work to go get food. So everything is very constricted and designed not to change as much as possible. So that's why oftentimes we tend to tolerate things that create more stress, or we just think, that's just 5 minutes a day. That's not a big deal. But all those things pile up and it goes such a long way when we start to remove them. We change ultimately, Tom. We change when it hurts enough. And that's certainly that was the point that I had to get to, hitting rock bottom, to be willing to say, you know what, maybe the only thing holding me back was me. But it doesn't have to be that way. And the way to not let it be that way is to simply say, okay, even when things are somewhat smooth, let me create a little discomfort. Let me create a little growth so that I'm never stagnant. And that will actually fulfill a number of the human needs and allow us to not have to hit some of those rock bottom places to then force change.
Dr. K, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you, find out more about your book or any of the keynote services or other resources you have, what might be the best place or places for them to go?
Absolutely. You can go to my website, drkarthikramanan.com. Everything is listed there in terms of working with entrepreneurs, in terms of working with executives and companies, as well as speaking for keynote bookings, that sort of thing. And I would certainly recommend checking out the book, The Emotionally Healthy You: How to Own Your Past and Love Your Future. You can get it on Amazon. And I didn't hold anything back in that book. Everything that I teach all my clients, there's certainly more things based on their specific needs, but all the key stuff that I teach every client is in that book. And I think that would be a really great place to start to explore. And certainly you can follow me on all the social channels as well.
We're going to add, of course, all of your socials, the book link, LinkedIn, etc., your website on our show notes. I hope we can continue this conversation.
I would absolutely love that, Tom. Thank you.
Compliance Podcast Network. Start your mornings with daily compliance news, quick, sharp updates on the top compliance and ethics stories in under 5 minutes every morning in Compliance Podcast Network. Because compliance never sleeps. Need practical advice fast? Check out Compliance Tip of the Day. One actionable idea to level up your program. Short and sweet, every day on Compliance Podcast Network. Got 10 minutes? We've got the week's top 10 stories. 10 for 10 brings you the big compliance headlines. Fast, fun, and focused. Every Saturday on Compliance Podcast Network. And don't miss the Sunday Book Review, where compliance meets culture through must-read books and big ideas every Sunday in Compliance Podcast Network. Whether you're in the office, on a walk, or commuting, stay smart, stay ethical, stay tuned. Only on the Compliance Podcast Network. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.